I did not hit her. It's bullcrap. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark. You're tearing me apart, Lisa. Hi, Dougie. The Room. So, The Room. Uh, The Room is a movie that I honestly cannot believe exists, but I'm happy it does. I ordered this on Amazon the other day, brand new, still in the packaging, mint condition, and I watched it. I've heard of this movie for years, but I've never actually watched it before myself. Today, I finally got the privilege of watching it. I've heard all about it. I've watched lengthy, extensive reviews about the film, but I never actually sat down and watched it from beginning to end. Well, today I finally got the opportunity to do that. It did not disappoint. It actually managed to be worse than I thought it would be. And that really says something. In case you don't know about The Room is known as the best bad movie of all time. By the way, I think I'm going to start doing this, putting the DVDs here, displaying them right here, like that. Maybe I'll find a better place to put them in the future, but I think I'm going to start doing that. But back to The Room. It's known as the best bad movie of all time. There is not one redeeming quality about this movie. As a matter of fact, I have so many notes. So many notes about this movie that I had to use the margins, and guess what? Not one thing I wrote down was a pro. You know, in my videos I always do pros and cons? Not one pro. There's not one redeeming quality about this film. Not one. I'm serious. But welcome back to Potty Plant Entertainment. And my name is Chris, and in case you don't know, I review movies and I rank them on a scale of 0 to 100 in increments of 5. Are you happy to be here? Because I'm not. But The Room isn't a movie that's so bad it's irritating like Wonder Woman 1984. Which, by the way, I gave that movie a 60 in my review for it. Now, as it sits, I would probably give that a 40. I hate that movie now. I just find more and more things about it that I hate. And I really cannot stand that movie anymore. I hate it. I hate it. I would even go so low as a 30 with it. I really hate Wonder Woman 1984 now. That movie, it sucks. I hate it. This isn't so bad that it's irritating. This is so bad it's good. It's so bad that you actually have a good time with how bad it is. You laugh throughout the movie because it's so incredibly, like, unbelievably terrible. So let's talk a little bit about it. So The Room, it came out in 2003. It stars Tommy Wiseau, Juliette Danielle, Greg Sestero, and a couple other actors. We don't need a name because, well, you never heard of any of them. It was directed by Tommy Wiseau. It was produced by Tommy Wiseau and Drew Caffey and Chloe Litzteet. And this movie is about a guy who's a banker, right? Played by Tommy Wiseau. And his fiance is cheating on him with his best friend. And so this movie is about them and the other characters dealing with this and like how we're going to tell us to Johnny and how Johnny might deal with this and the people in their lives. It's just sort of a whole like soap opera thing going on. This movie. So this movie is, to give you an idea of how bad this is before I get into everything that's wrong with it, because trust me, I have quite a few notes. This movie is so terrible that most of the people who worked on the movie quit halfway through it because Tommy would not listen to anyone. Everyone was telling him while they were making this movie, because he wrote, directed, produced, and starred in it. And everyone told him, dude, this is awful. Stop. but he didn't want to listen to anyone, and so people got fed up with him and quit. So he had to like hire like a lot of new people like halfway through making this movie. In fact, it's so bad they made a movie about the making of it called The Disaster Artist, which I have not seen, but I would certainly like to because I've heard it's really good. But it is crazy, like how bad this movie. It exceeded my expectations when I watched it today. And this is going to be a long video. I know I've already been talking for a few minutes now, but this is going to be a long video because I have a lot of notes. So sit back, get comfy, get some popcorn. We have quite a few notes to go through. Also, we're going to get heavily into spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie, now is your warning. Okay. Here we go. The editing. This movie is so badly edited. The editing is terrible. The scene structures make no sense. The lip dubbing is awful. The acting is awful. Awful. Everyone's so terrible in this movie. Awful. The story, the script is awful. The dialogue is awful. And when I say the dialogue is awful, I mean it's really awful. Like, it's like cringeworthy. This movie's cringy. The things that the people say in this movie are things that nobody would say. That's not how somebody would say these things. It's so bad. There's several sex scenes in this movie, and they go on for way too long. And all but one of them include the main girl, Lisa, who is cheating on Tommy Wiseau's character, Johnny. And she has 2 sex scenes with Tommy Wiseau. And the second one even recycles some clips from the first sex scene. Okay. So there's a lot of them in this movie. They take too long, especially the first one. The first one goes on forever. So this kid, whose name is Danny, he comes over to their house, right? Because he's like, Tommy like sort of like looks after him. He's like a father figure to them. And he comes over and they tell him that they're going to go upstairs and right? And they go upstairs and then he goes upstairs with them. And he jumps into bed with them and they start tickling him every day, right? You know, it's cute, whatever. And then he's like, oh, I get it. You guys want to be alone, don't you? And I'm like, well, I mean, they did tell you they were going upstairs to do that. Did you think they wanted you there? That's so bad. Oh, man. This movie also has a lot of scenes where they throw around a football for seemingly no reason. My dog's getting excited now because I laugh so hard. Lisa's feelings for Johnny do also seem to change very quick. They have this super long sex scene, right? And she's holding this rose in bed as she's sniffing it. She's like, she's thinking of Johnny. And then her mom comes over and she's like, I don't love Johnny anymore. And I'm like, 2 seconds ago, like, you looked like you were just madly in love with him. That came out of nowhere. Okay. And then at some point during this movie, I started to think, is this movie nothing but people just showing up at their house? Because almost every scene in this movie opens up with somebody knocking on their door and coming to their house. So Lisa, right, when I told you she's in love with, she's cheating on Johnny, right? But she's cheating on him with his best friend, Mark. And Mark comes over to the house because, like I said, that's pretty much how every scene opens up with somebody coming over to their house. And he sits down, and she likes him, so she's trying to get all sexy. And she's like, he's sitting there with his arms on the armrest, and she goes on his arm. And I'm sitting there like, is that supposed to be sexy? That's not sexy. That's awkward. Okay, so Mark like resists her love urges at first, right? And he gets up to leave. He's like, okay, I'm out of here. So he stands up to leave, and then they stop and they look at each other, And I'm like, you just said no. Okay. The lip dubbing. Did I say the lip dubbing was bad? Yeah, the lip dubbing is really bad. Okay, so Johnny's character is up for Tommy Wiseau's character Tommy Johnny. He's up for a promotion, right, at work. And he comes home and Lisa's like, "Did you get the promotion?" And he goes, "Nah." And he sits down and she comes over, she sits down next to him and she's like, "I guess you didn't get the promotion, huh?" Well, yeah, he just said no. Oh, man. And so then they go back upstairs to have sex again. And she's like, at first he says he doesn't really want to. And then she's like, "Come on, you owe me one." And I'm like, owe you for what? There's no mention of him owing her a... None. Where does this come from? Okay, so there's a scene where Lisa is talking to her mom, right? They're having a conversation because she talks to her mom a lot, and basically every conversation that they have is the same one. But her mom very nonchalantly in the middle of this conversation says, "I just got my test results back. They came back positive. I have breast cancer." And then she's like, "I'm not that worried about it." You're not worried about it? You have breast cancer. You're old. You're not worried about it? What? What? I would be terrified. What? And again, she brings this up in the middle of their conversation. Like, if I were her, as soon as I got those test results, I would have immediately picked up the phone and called my daughter and told her. But they're already talking about something, and they're sitting there just drinking, out of cups or whatever, and they're talking. And then she, in the middle of this conversation, brings this up. And on top of that, she brings it up very nonchalantly and makes it known she doesn't care. What? Oh, and by the way, it has nothing to do with the plot either. It never gets brought back up, so there's no point in even mentioning it. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna try so hard not to laugh too much about this. Okay, so Lisa, and I don't remember if this was the same conversation or a different one, but she tells her mom that she's like, "Johnny's not who you think he is." She's like, "He didn't get the promotion yesterday, and when he came home, he got drunk, and he hit me." Okay, and then her response to this is, "Well, he financially takes care of you. You need to stay with him." What? Her mom gives her the worst advice throughout this movie. It's crazy. Okay. So Johnny, another thing about this movie I noticed is that Johnny actually isn't in the movie as much as you would think he is. He's gone for a lot of the film, and every conversation that's had in the film is about him. So if he's not around, you know what the characters are doing? Well, first of all, they're either having sex, or they're talking about Johnny, or they're having sex and talking about Johnny. Okay, so then Denny, the kid I said that Johnny takes care of, which, by the way, isn't a kid. He's 3 years older than the actress who plays the girl he's engaged with, but you wouldn't guess that by watching the movie. He confesses to Johnny that he is in love with his fiance. And then he's like, "Don't worry about it. It's fine." He gives him like the absolute worst advice about this. And then he says, he asks him about like this other girl. He's like, "How's Elizabeth?" I think they said her name was. And he's like, "Oh, I really like her. I want to marry her." And I'm like, "But you just said you're in love with his fiance. Like literally a second before." Okay, the movie is kind of boring at times. I'm not going to lie. This movie actually can be kind of boring. And if it wasn't for the poor dialogue, you'd probably pass out. the characters contradict themselves sometimes. Sometimes they'll say one thing and then later on in the movie they'll say something completely different. Lisa is an awful character. She's an SLUT, and she's just awful. She's like evil. Like, what an awful character. But you know what? What did I say? The actress Juliette Danielle. She's the only one who actually gives a somewhat decent performance in this movie. She actually is kind of believable. Everyone else is god awful. So I can at least give her that. Okay, so Lisa continues to have sex with Johnny, even though she doesn't love him. I don't understand why it is that she keeps sleeping with him if she's not into him. Tommy's character, Tommy Wiseau's character, Johnny, gosh, that's so confusing, is flawless. There's nothing wrong with him, and everyone loves him. He's just perfect, big brother kind of guy. He painted himself a character that's just so perfect and flawless and lovable. Everyone knows him, and everyone loves him. Which is just so stupid. There's a scene where Denny meets with a drug dealer, and the drug dealer puts a gun to his head, and then Mark and Johnny, come to save him, right? And they take the guy, they hold his arms, and because they're on the roof of their apartment building, they like to hang out on the roof of the apartment building for some reason, and they take him down the stairs. And then 2 minutes later, they come back. And I'm sitting there like, what did they do with the drug dealer? Did they just throw him out on the street? What did they do with him? Where did he go? So... And then, for some reason, Johnny is, expected... Johnny, financially... He pays for, Denny's college and everything. And then, Lisa's mom, she mentions in the movie that she came to him asking for some money for her friend to have a down payment. And when he said, well, this is kind of complicated. I don't know if I really want to do this. She's like, well, I expected more from your future husband. I expected him to be a little bit more generous. Okay, so does everyone in this movie just mooch off of him? Okay, so there's this conversation between... So they add in this character in the movie who's a friend of Tommy, and he's a psychiatrist, right? And Mark comes in and he joins this conversation, and they're talking about Lisa and everything, and women and everything. And then Mark randomly says in the middle of this conversation, I'm thinking about moving into a new apartment. Out of nowhere, he just says it. And then nobody acknowledges it either. The next sentence to be said was from Johnny, but it doesn't have anything to do with the apartment. He just says something about what they were talking about. So they were talking about Lisa, then he goes, I'm thinking about moving to a new apartment, and then Johnny says something about Lisa. It was so weird. Why was it even there? It didn't make any sense. Also, it doesn't come back into play in the movie either about Mark thinking about moving out, so there wasn't even any point in being there. Okay, so then in this conversation, the psychiatrist guy says to Johnny, he says, so how exactly did you and Lisa meet? You never told us. And I'm like, okay, so him and Lisa have been together for 5 years. Okay, as I mentioned in the movie. He never once... You guys never bothered to ask, even Mark, who's his best friend, they never asked him how they met? He never even bothered to just bring it up? You know, my uncle once I didn't ask about it, he just randomly once told me how he met my aunt. I didn't ask, he just told me the story. One time we were at Disney World waiting for a bus, and he just told me the story. And it was a nice story. So I cannot believe that after all these years that nobody once asked or he never told them. Okay, I guess I got so many notes. Okay, now, one thing you will hear a lot in this movie is the words, oh, hi. People say that a lot in this movie. Oh, hi, Mark. Oh, hi, Lisa. Oh, hi, Danny. People say that a lot in this movie. Okay, so then there's this scene where Danny, the psychiatrist guy, Johnny, and Mark, they get together in Johnny's apartment, and they're all wearing tuxedos. And then they go outside to throw around a football. And that's the end of the scene. And it's never mentioned as to why they were wearing tuxedos. And I saw there's an interview on this disc where Tommy Wiseau was asked what about that scene, and his explanation for it made no sense. Let's see. Okay, so then there's a scene where Johnny and Mark are in this cafe, right? And they go to the register and they ask for hot chocolate, and they're like, "Okay, we'll bring it right out to you." And then they go and sit down, right? And I'm thinking, and then they bring in the hot chocolate. And the idea is that you go up and you ask for it, you go sit down, you eat and whatever, and then you go pay for it. And I'm thinking, well, if you have to go front to order it, why don't you just pay for it up front as well? Or maybe that's not how that works. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I just thought that was weird when I watched the movie, but I don't know. Maybe you can correct me. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. People will often come to this apartment and then they will stay for like a conversation and then leave. Like they'll show up and you don't really know what their intention is of showing up. And then like a character will say something to them that will suck them into a conversation. And after they have that conversation, they'll be like, "I gotta go." And I'm like, what did you show up for then? Why are you here? What did you come over for? The movie also constantly reminds us that Mark and Johnny are best friends. If you forget that Mark and Johnny are best friends, shame on you. Because they must tell you 100 times throughout this movie that Mark and Johnny are best friends. Remember, everyone, Mark and Johnny are best friends. Okay? Remember. Lisa also, she's quite contradictory because she'll bring up things and then she'll either say, "I've got to leave," or she'll say, "I don't want to talk about it." And I'm always sitting there like, why did you even bring it up? Even her mom points it out at some point. She's like, "I don't want to talk about it." Her mom's like, "Well, if you don't want to talk about it, why did you even bring it up?" I was like, thank you. Because she always does that. There's too many shots of the Golden Gate Bridge in this movie. This movie has a lot of shots, like a lot of times where it transitions between scenes, they'll show you sights around San Francisco because that's where they live. And too many of those shots are of the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, we get it, they're in San Francisco, stop showing us the Golden Gate Bridge. There's also a lot of pointless shots in this movie that just don't need to be there. Like there's a scene where, like, Mark and Johnny, they go for a jog, and of course they throw around a football. And then they drive to Johnny's apartment, they get out of the car, and then the scene ends, and then it moves on to a completely different time and a different day. And I'm like, well, what was the point of showing us going back to their apartment if you weren't going to show us what happens once they get to the apartment? Stuff like that. Like, there's pointless shots that just don't need to be there. Johnny drinks. So Johnny's character, one thing about his character is that he doesn't drink, right? Because he's a saint, right? And at his birthday party in the movie, he's handed a glass of champagne. He clinks glasses with everyone, and then he drinks it. I'm like, I thought you didn't drink. Also, he gets drunk earlier in the movie because, like, he didn't get the promotion, and he really doesn't bother. Lisa, like, tries to give him a drink to, like, you know, like, help him feel better and whatever, and he really doesn't fight her that hard on it. Like, people who don't drink, like myself, we're pretty adamant about it. Like, don't give me a drink. I'm not going to drink it. I don't want to drink. I'm 21. I don't drink. Okay? If you give me a drink, I'm going to tell you no. And if you keep persisting, you're just going to annoy me. Okay? That's what it's like for people who don't drink. We don't go, "Come on, just try it." All right. No. Mark and Johnny have a fight over Lisa at the birthday party. Okay, and then they shake hands and like, "Okay, I'm sorry, man. Like, you're my best friend. I shouldn't have done that. Like, whatever, right?" And then they start fighting over the same thing again in the next scene. The scene ends after they shake hands, and then the next scene, Johnny walks back up to Mark, and he starts instigating it again. And it's like, well, why didn't you just have them fight one time and then carry on? Why did you have them fight one time, make up, and then have them fight again and then continue on with the movie? There should have been one fight, continue on with the movie. Not one pointless fight, then another fight, and then continue on with the movie. It makes no sense. Okay. Okay. So Johnny. Okay. So Johnny wiretaps the phones in the house after he finds out that Lisa is cheating on him, right? And he wiretaps the phones in the house. He just randomly pulls a wiretap out of his butt and wiretaps the house because he just happens to have that. He wiretaps the phones, and he he plays a conversation that Lisa has with Mark over the phone to her. But I noticed that the playback was like a little bit different. I think it was at least a little bit different from the original conversation. Also, what was the point of it? Why didn't he just confront her? Why did he tape a phone conversation? Um, and then they mentioned the same scene where he's like, ah, "I got you, Lisa, busted." He's like, I gave you the last 7 years of my life," and I'm like, "Well, hold up. I thought it was 5 years. Was it 5 years or 7 years? Movie, make up your mind." Because I'm pretty sure earlier in the movie they said it was 5 years. Like you can check, but I'm pretty sure they said 5 years. Characters often will come and go throughout the movie, and there's also characters that don't need to be there and have no point in existing. So so here's the ending of the movie. So basically, Johnny and Lisa, they have a big fight, and then she leaves to go be with Mark, and then Johnny, he's really upset. He starts trashing his house, and then he shoots himself, and he dies. And Mark and Lisa come over, and they find him laying there on the floor, and they actually can't tell if he's dead or not. He literally put a gun in his mouth and blew out the back of his head. He's laying there with all this blood around, and they're like, "Wake up! Is he dead? Is he dead?" Can we talk about the poster? What is this picture? It's horrendous. And this title right here looks like it was made in Microsoft Word. And you know what? It honestly wouldn't surprise me if it was. Oh, also, at some point in the movie, Lisa lies about being pregnant to everyone. She does it for no reason, and it has no impact on the story. Remember when I mentioned earlier that like the interview on here, what he was asked about the suit scene and his response to it made no sense. Yeah, he's asked a few questions in this interview, and none of his responses to any of the questions make any sort of sense. None of them. Not one of his responses makes a lick of sense. I didn't understand anything. Like, he was asked, why is the movie called The Room? By the way, that's another con I had with the movie. Why is it called The Room? I don't know. And apparently, Tommy Wiseau doesn't either, because his response to it makes no sense. If you ask him, why is it called The Room? I guarantee you he's going to say a bunch of mumbled mess. It doesn't mean anything. So there's a scene where Mark is mad at like the psychiatrist guy. They're on the roof of the apartment building, of course, because for whatever reason they go up there. And he's confronting him. He's like, "Are you sleeping with Lisa?" And he gets mad at him, and he grips his shirt, and he holds him over the side of the building, almost killing him. And he pulls him back up, and he's like, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm all right." And I thought, dude, call the cops. He just tried to kill you. What? You forgive him that fast? He was about to throw you off a building. Let's see. Okay, and so Johnny's like really upset at some point in this movie, right? And he's talking to Lisa, and he says she's like, "I still love you." After, this was after he didn't get the promotion. She's like, "Well, I still love you," and he's like, "You're the only one who still does." And literally everyone throughout this movie loves this guy. Everybody in his life. He goes to a store, people instantly recognize him. And they're like, "Oh, hey, Johnny. Hey, my man, my boy, my main OG, Johnny." So why would he say that? Oh, and before I wrap this up, we got to talk about the flower shop scene. So this is like one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. He goes into a flower shop, and it's so poorly edited, so poorly scripted, so poorly written. It's so bad. "Bye, doggy. You're my favorite customer." Look, this was a long video. I know this is definitely my longest review ever. I am going to give The Room, of course, my very first 0. This movie is awful, but at the same time, I kind of want to give it a 100. Oh, The Room. Oh, man. This is a funny movie. Anyways, thank you for sticking with me, and thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Pod Player Entertainment for more. Hit the like button. Leave movie review suggestions down in the comments down below. Follow me on Instagram at Pod Player Entertainment for channel updates, and much love.